Story goes about a group of college students from Fort Lauderdale. There was a girl there, and she remembered there were 6 of them, 3 boys and 3 girls, and they picked up the bus at the old terminal on 34th Street, carrying sandwiches and wine in paper bags, dreaming of golden beaches and the tides of the sea as the gray, cold spring of New York vanished behind them. Vingo was on board from the beginning. As the bus passed through Jersey and into Philly, they began to notice that Vingo never moved. He sat in front of the young people, his dusty face masking his age, dressed in a plain brown, ill-fitting suit. His fingers were stained from cigarettes, and he chewed the inside of his lip a lot, frozen into some personal cocoon of silence. Somewhere outside of Washington, deep into the night, the bus pulled into a Howard Johnson's, and everybody got off except Vingo. He sat rooted in his seat, and the young people began to wonder about him, trying to imagine his life. Perhaps he was a sea captain. Maybe he had run away from his wife. He could be an old soldier going home. When they went back to the bus, the girl sat beside him and introduced herself. "We're going to Florida," the girl said brightly. "You going that far?" "I don't know," Vingo said. "I've never been there," she said. "I hear it's beautiful." "It is," he said quietly, as if remembering something he had tried to forget. "You live there?" "I did time there in the Navy, Jacksonville." "Want some wine?" she said. He smiled, took the bottle of Chianti and took a swig. He thanked her and retreated again into silence. After a while, she went back to the others, and Vingo nodded in sleep. In the morning, they awoke outside another Howard Johnson's, and this time, Vingo went in. The girl insisted that he join them. He seemed very shy and ordered black coffee, smoked nervously as the young people chattered about their sleeping on beaches. When they went back to the bus, the girl sat with Vingo again, and after a while, slowly and painfully, with great hesitation, he began to tell his story. He'd been in jail in New York for the past 4 years, and now he was going home. "Are you married?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" she said. "Well, when I was in the can, I wrote to my wife," he said. I told her, I said, "Martha, I understand if you can't stay married to me." I told her that. I said I was going to be away for a long time and that she couldn't stand it if the kids kept asking questions, if it hurt her too much. Well, she could just forget me, get a new guy. She's a wonderful woman, really something. And forget about me. I told her she didn't have to write me or nothing, and she didn't, not for 3.5 years. "And now you're going home not knowing?" "Yeah," he said shyly. "Well, last week, when I was sure the parole was coming through, I wrote her. I told her that if she has a new guy, I understood. But if she didn't, if she would take me back, she should let me know. We used to live in the town, Brunswick, just before Jacksonville. But there's a big oak tree just as you come into town, a very famous tree, huge. I told her that if she'd take me back, she should put a yellow handkerchief on the tree, and I'd get off and come home. If she didn't want me, forget it. No handkerchief, and I'd go through." "Wow," said the girl. "Wow." She told the others, and soon all of them were in it. Caught up in the approach of Brunswick, looking at the pictures, Vingo showed them of his wife and his 3 children. The woman was handsome in a plain way, and the children still unformed in the cracked, much-handled snapshot. Now they were 20 miles from Brunswick, and the young people took over the window seats on the right side, waiting for the approach of the great oak tree. Vingo stopped, looking, tightening his face into an ex-con's mask, as if fortifying himself against still another disappointment. Then it was 10 miles, and then 5, and the bus acquired a dark, hushed mood, full of silence, of absence, of lost years, of the woman's plain face, of the sudden letter on the breakfast table, of the wonder of children, of the iron bars of solitude. You know, it was the great American editorialist, newsman, entertainer, I'm not exactly sure what to call him, but Paul Harvey, who used to always tell us the rest of the story. This story kind of left hanging. What happens here? It reminds me of back in 6th grade when there was a story I vaguely remember about a princess who fell in love with a man, but he fell in love with one of her maids, and he got found out, and the king punished him, and the princess got to decide. She opened one door, a tiger would come through and eat the man that she loved. Whereas if she pointed to the other door, he'd find her maid there, and the two of them could go off and live a happy life away from the kingdom. And that's where it ended, with the princess pointing at a door, and the audience left wanting to know which door did she point at. 6th grade, we were told, tell the rest of the story. Finish the story. Tell me what you think happened. You know, Mark's gospel originally ended at verse 8. The earliest manuscripts that we find don't have anything other than the ending with women trembling and bewildered, fleeing from the tomb, saying nothing to anyone out of fear. And yet, we kind of know how that worked out. You know, if I was to tell you that in 2005, Steve Jobs went to the planners and the engineers at Apple and told them, you know, I want to take our MP3 player and I want to take a mobile phone and I want to put them together and I want to add all sorts of other things to it. I want to add these new PDAs like a Palm Pilot and put them all together in a supercomputer that people can carry in their pocket with them. Now, I don't have to tell most of you the story. Most of you know that in 2007, the iPhone was released and it put a supercomputer in the average person's pocket. Some of you know part of it. Some of you are completely unaware of it. But you know, the neat thing about stories is that they are designed to pique our interest. And in this case, in the case of Mark's gospel, it's designed so that those who know, well, they want to hear it again and again and again and again because it's such a wonderful story. And the people who are semi-aware, well, they're the ones who are listening. And they get to hear the story until they know it. And the people who don't know, well, it's the role of the others to share with them the story. How did the story end? Well, we think we know how it ends. The women eventually shared. It's interesting, Mark's gospel drops it off there, but in the other gospels, the disciples vie with each other to try and get to the tomb in time. You know, Peter and John race each other. In John's gospel, Peter, first time he sees Jesus is from a boat. He can't wait for the boat to sail to shore. He dives into the water and swims to Jesus. Men are kind of crazy, aren't we? We got to make it a competition. I'm going to be first to the Messiah. And yet, for the women, well, you got to remember in first century Jerusalem, first century Israel, women were not considered reliable witnesses. It's also kind of damning when you think about it, about Mark's gospel, because it ends with the witness of 3 women. In court, that would have been thrown out. Not good enough, not reliable. The story that they had to tell was so fanciful that it would have just proven that you can't trust a woman. Now, it's 2,000 years later and we know better. But back then, that was the way that they felt. The story here illustrates several things. One, you know, we know that Jesus has told his disciples 3 times that what was going to happen was he got to Jerusalem He was going to be taken. He was going to be beaten. He was going to be spat upon. He was going to be crucified. He was going to die. But he was going to come back from the dead. But it's pretty clear he only told the 12. Because as the women go to the tomb, one of the first questions they ask is, who will roll away the stone? Either their faith wasn't great, which I find hard to believe, looking at what they've done in all the rest of the story, looking at what they've done in the other Gospels, or they were just unaware of what to expect. Who will roll away the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. Oh, that little detail. Mark doesn't throw in details very often, so when he does, it's good to pay attention. Very large stone. And yet it had just been pushed to the side. This was a stone that would have taken a couple men to roll in the place, a couple big strong ones, stronger than me, and it would have been sealed. And we know from the other Gospels it was guarded. And yet when they got there were no guards. The seal was broken, and the stone was rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe. I love how Mark leaves this kind of open to interpretation. Anyone who knows Hebrew scripture knows that quite often angels walk amongst us. There was a heavenly figure in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There were 3 men who walked down the road and were encountered by Abraham, and he invited them in and gave them a lavish feast. 2 of them went on to Sodom, where they met up with Lot, and Lot gave them a place to stay. Over and over throughout Hebrew scripture, angels walk amongst us. Even in Christian scriptures, the writer of Hebrews tells us that many people have entertained angels unaware, and so we should always be kind. But Mark doesn't even actually say this is an angel. It could just be some dude, some guy who decided to take an early morning walk through the graveyard, saw an empty tomb, and said, "What the heck, I think I'll go and sit in there." I know, not likely. But whether or not this was just some guy, or whether it was an angel, he had a heavenly message. It's interesting, the Greek word for a heavenly messenger is angelos. Angelos is where we get the word angel. They saw him there. He was seated in a white robe. He told them, "Don't be alarmed. Fear not," the most common command given in the Bible. Do not fear. Do not be alarmed. Fear not. Do not worry. He says, I know why you're here. You're looking for Jesus, the one from Nazareth. He was crucified. He is risen. He's not here. See, this is where they laid him. This is the place. But go and tell his disciples and Peter. Ouch. Go and tell his disciples and Peter. He's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Poor Peter, racked with guilt because on that Monday, Thursday evening and through the early morning of Good Friday, 3 separate times he had said, "I don't know the man. Never seen the man, never heard of the man." He distanced himself from Christ. And had to have been feeling horrible. The man who walked on water crumbled when faced with the question, "Weren't you with that Jesus guy?" It would be real easy in his case to be downstruck, to be thinking that he's not part anymore, that he's been kicked out. And so the message says, tell the disciples and Peter, because he's not going to consider himself a disciple anymore. He's still part. Tell them all he will meet you as he told you. He will meet you as he told you. You know, as we look through Holy Week, it's really easy to recognize those moments in our life. As we look through Lent, the entire point of Lent is to take time to consider, where have I gone astray from God? And where have I turned my back on him? Where have I denied him? And when we start focusing on that, it's very, very easy to feel like we're unworthy, to feel like there's no hope, to be like Vingo on the bus, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing if there was going to be a welcome, not knowing any of those things. And yet the message said, you too, Peter. Tell the disciples, and especially Peter, you too, Peter. You're still included, Peter. I'm going to meet you just as I told you. That message still rings for us today. He's going to meet us just as he told us he would. He's going to be there for us just as he told us he would, because he has risen. He's no longer in the tomb, and he's gone ahead of us, and he will meet us as he said. The rest of the story with Steve Jobs was the phone was made. The rest of the story is that God loves you. Now they were 20 miles from Brunswick, and the young people took over the window seats on the right side, waiting for the approach of the great oak tree. Vingo stopped looking, tightening his face into an ex-con's mask, as if fortifying himself against still another disappointment. Then it was 10 miles, and then 5, and the bus acquired a dark, hushed mood, full of silence, of absence, of lost years, of the woman's plain face, of the sudden letter on the breakfast table, of the wonder of children, or the iron bars of solitude. Then suddenly all the young people were up, out of their seats, screaming and shouting and crying and doing small dances, shaking clenched fists in triumph and exaltation. All except Vingo. Vingo sat there stunned, looking at the oak tree. It was covered with yellow handkerchiefs, 20 of them, 30 of them, maybe hundreds. A tree that stood like a banner of welcoming, blowing and billowing in the wind, turned into a gorgeous yellow blur by the passing bus. As the young people shouted, the old Khan rose from his seat, holding himself tightly, and made his way to the front of the bus to go home. Easter is about the empty tomb. It's about the invitation to go home. But you can't get to the empty tomb unless you go through the cross. And what you need to know is that every bit of that cross is covered in a yellow ribbon that God has tied there for you, saying, yes, I want you. Yes, come back to me. Yes, you have a home. Just get off the bus and come to me. I will meet you as I promised. God is always faithful and always will be. The women, they were trembling and bewildered. They went out from the tomb and fled, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Mark leaves us with a cliffhanger, and yet, does he really? Because you know how this story ends. It ends because someone told you. That's the end of the story. But what if you were so filled with the faith, hope, and love of God that is overpowering and transforming. What if you're so filled of that you went out and overcame your fear and overcame your trembling and told somebody the greatest story ever told about a God who loves the world so much that he sent his only Son, not to judge us, but to save us. How he walked amongst us, how he taught us the ways of God, how he taught us how to love, how he modeled that selfless love all the way to a cross, taking punishment designed for others, designed for us, designed for you, designed for me, all the way to the cross, and died there as our sacrificial lamb, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Maybe the story will transform them too, as they hear how the tomb was empty, how he has gone ahead of us, and how he will meet us as he promised us. And maybe that's how the story ends. Or better yet, maybe they too tell someone. What will be the rest of the story? Are you going to stay home, trembling, bewildered? Or are you going to share with your friends and loved ones? Are you going to share with those in need and let them know that this day is special because he has risen? He has risen indeed.